Welcome to chillTV News of the Week. I'm here with Rob Bogunovic, who's running for the People's Party of Canada. Rob, this is your first foray into elected politics, as I understand it, but perhaps not the first time that you've garnered some publicity. I recall you being in the news a bit last year over your opposition to having to be a member of the BC Teachers Federation in order to be able to teach in the public school system here in Chilliwack. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, the controversy wasn't so much that I have an opposition to trade unionism in general. It's actually how these unions, especially the public unions, are using their monopoly to basically force teachers to support an agenda irregardless of their religious or their political concerns. And what I saw with what was going on in the union at the time was we had a trustee named Barry Neufeld, and he put forth a Facebook post challenging a new curriculum, SOGI 123, which was being rolled out across the province, often without any real public consultation. Barry tried to bring some understanding and awareness to some of the things that he had concerns about. He used some interesting language, some satire, and basically what happened was the union and a lot of other people in the community took exception to his bringing up the issue. I then looked deeply into SOGI 123, studied it, read through the entire ARC Foundation, and then I contacted the union with my concerns. I found the union was unreceptive. They didn't answer any of the questions I raised. They didn't address any of the concerns. They gave very short responses to what I raised as challenges. And then they continued on with what were demonstrable lies about what SOGI 123 was. They consistently said that it was an anti-bullying curriculum. But if you read through the ARC Foundation, you discover that SOGI 1, the 1 stands for a set of policies. And that's what a lot of the individuals were actually responding to, was what was in those policies, not what was in curriculum. We've had anti-bullying curriculum in the school system for decades without any controversy. The policies, which were brought in without much public consultation at all, that's what he was responding to. Now, it's fine if individuals have a public, spat over what's in a policy, what's happening within education. I expect that. What surprised me was when the union went and basically said, we're going to hit them with a Human Rights Commission, which is a slap suit. We're going to attack Barry Neufeld and try to silence him from expressing his opinion. And to me, that was when I just said, okay, I need to act in defense of my faith and in defense of my political opinions. They were going against their own principles. And I'm going to read this from the BCTF Members Guide because people need to understand what the BCTF was doing. In the Members Guide, it says, section 3446, that the BCTF affirms that freedom of speech is a foundation of democracy, and that we recognize that satire is an important element of free speech, and that the BCTF opposes the use of slap suits as they are a tactic used by the powerful to silence public debate and discussion. And yet that's exactly what the union did. They used a slap suit to silence discussion on an issue. And as far as I'm concerned, that was a step too far. Then again, with all the lies that they were promoting, I just said, okay, I need to take a stance. So what I asked was if they would grant me a Section 17 exemption for religious grounds so that my union dues would be redirected to Cyrus Center, a charity that I support. It helps at-risk youth, and that's a cause I really care about. And they dismissed it immediately out of hand without even giving me an explanation, a chance to explain why I was asking for it. So I had to go forward with the LRB. And the LRB ruled that even though they saw that I was advancing religious arguments, the fact that I also had a political objection made it a political objection. So the presence of a political aspect to the objection means it's no longer a religious objection. I find that to be strange logic. But that's where we are.
Well, speaking of politics, we'll move back to federal politics. What is the key part of the People's Party of Canada's platform in terms of this community, in your view?
Yeah. The People's Party of Canada stands for freedom, and there's two different strands by which this plays out in our policies. The first, and what a lot of people really do care about, is the idea that the government, the federal government, is taking way too much of our money. There's so many different taxes, and it's basically the principle of Adam Smith is that governments should not do more than is necessary. People make better decisions with their own money than governments that are very far distant from them. And so I'm a John Locke, Adam Smith libertarian, right? I basically believe in classical liberalism, which today is mostly referred to as conservatism. And so the People's Party believes in shrinking the size of the federal government, transferring tax points to the provinces, and so that the municipalities and the provincial governments have more control over healthcare, over education, over housing, over the things that really impact the communities in which we live. Let's keep the money as close to the communities because that's where the impacts are being felt. If we're dealing with something in BC, we shouldn't have to convince members of parliament in Quebec that we have a problem and that they should respond to it. So we want to basically shrink down the federal government, get it doing what the Constitution says it should be doing. That's one strand. And then, of course, we want to go after other things that will put more money into the pockets of Canadians.
Speaking of more money, one of your major planks in your platform, as I understand it, has to do with marketing boards.
Sure.
And I think your commitment is to phase out marketing boards and the quota system, which help to keep the price of eggs, milk, and some other agricultural commodities higher than they otherwise might be due to market forces. How is that going over in Chilliwack, where we have traditionally been an agricultural community, as well as Agassiz and some other areas?
Well, I do see an awful lot of very large Mark Straw signs on the corners of dairy farmers and their property, which is understandable. I mean, in politics, it's always the, politics is the collective act of voting for your own self-interest. And there's no question that dairy farmers have benefited off of a quota system. But the reality was almost all other sectors in Canada are actually being hurt to varying degrees because of our quota system. It also is a question of whether or not this is a fair system for the Canadian consumer. As you acknowledge, it does artificially increase the price paid by milk, dairy, poultry. All of these things hit the consumer. And actually, it's been calculated about $100 per person per year. That's the indirect subsidy that comes from this. And that hurts the poorest members of our society the most. So I'm always asked, do I want to side with the small number of these dairy producers, which once was 135,000, is now down to 10,000. The amalgamation, across Canada. The amalgamation that's being driven by this is faster than any other sector in agriculture. Do I want to side with 10,000 producers or 36 million Canadians? And to me, even if I'm in a rural, agricultural community, I have a hard time siding with the very small number of producers, however much political power and clout they have, over these 36 million Canadians.
Would you say that's the main point of difference between you and the Conservative Party and Mark Straw?
I don't think it's the main point of difference. Supply management isn't the thing that got me supporting Max Bernier. When Max Bernier broke away from the party, he basically called out the Conservatives for being morally corrupt and intellectually bankrupt. Now, at the time, I had been watching Andrew Scheer.
That was right after he lost the leadership.
That was a year after he lost the leadership. Yeah, it is true. But the leadership itself, and as I studied this more, there's all kinds of things in that leadership that reeks of corruption. Now, so I wasn't looking at that at the time. What I was looking at was the intellectual bankruptcy of this party. I was watching Andrew Scheer run away from fights that traditionally Conservatives would stand and defend. And I was just disheartened because I understand how political correctness works. It tries to put people into a box and say you cannot discuss things outside this box. By Andrew Scheer playing the game of political correctness, he's trapped in a box that pushes them more and more and more away from the ability to articulate and defend true conservative values. And the only answer to political correctness is to step out of that box. And then once you stepped out, people will call you names, but now you can have a conversation. So I saw the intellectual bankruptcy of the Conservative Party because they were no longer conservative. They had essentially tried to move into the center where they'd be less offensive. And also, there was a political game to be played because the Liberals abandoned the center. The Liberals follow their leader, and Justin Trudeau has led them away from liberal values. He's basically an illiberal government. He is, as near as I can tell, advocating things like social justice, political correctness, which you can pretty much put an overriding shell of cultural Marxism. That's where he's led his party. And they are opposed to so many of the fundamental freedoms that we have depended upon in this country, freedoms that his dad helped to enshrine into our charter.
Thinking of the national campaign, what do you think realistically is the most positive outcome for the People's Party in this election?
Yeah, being optimistic, I see a chance and an avenue for us to actually win. Now, a lot of things have to happen, a perfect alignment. But what we see right now on the national stage, something like over 60% of Liberals are not happy with the direction the Liberal Party has taken. They do not see the Liberals truly representing their values. And so those are disgruntled. But many of them are saying, well, we have to vote Liberal because otherwise Andrew Scheer will win. About half of the Conservatives are already very disgruntled with the direction the Conservative Party is taking, but about half of them are saying that, well, we have to vote Conservative because otherwise Trudeau will win. Now, if both of them recognize a third option, if both of them hear what the PPC is basically presenting and they resonate with it, as many of them have, we could see a collapse of both those traditional parties. And it's happened in Britain. It's happened in Europe. We've already seen that the old parties have basically been in rapid decline because new parties that are actually listening to the concerns of people, they're gaining momentum. So if we see those collapses, and it's quite possible, we've seen it before. We've seen it in 1993 with the Conservatives. We saw it with Stéphane Dion and Ignatieff with the Liberals. If those votes collapse, they got to collapse somewhere. In Quebec, I think the vote could easily collapse from the Liberals to, the PPC. And in the English Canada, I think we can do very well.
Well, I guess we'll find out in a few weeks. I want to thank you for joining us here today, and look forward to our interview next week. Tune in to chillTV for our ongoing election coverage.